In July 2019, a series of routine maintenance works on a rural Worcestershire pig farm led to a truly shocking discovery on the property's grounds. There were three searches in total, all of which focused their attention on the septic tank. During that first search, as the septic tank were being emptied, the workers found some small bones which they believed to be from a small animal such as a chicken. They discarded them over a nearby hedge and thought nothing more of it. But it seems as though the work they did wasn't sufficient enough to prevent that blockage because the problem remained. The homeowner called them back and they did another clearance of the septic tank. More bones were found, again small ones that were discarded over the hedge, but this time some hair was also found. This isn't exactly uncommon, but the amount would later in hindsight make the workers believe that it may have been human. With that second search also not stopping this blockage in the septic tank, a new team was called because the first team were unavailable. A far more professional outfit, they arrived with bigger and better equipment, and they fully drained the septic tank this time. Once they'd done that, one of the workers noticed a bag at the very bottom of the tank. Recovering it, it looked to be made from a hessian or sack material. Inside were more bones, this time much larger than the smaller ones that had been previously discarded. Informing the homeowner, they thought they might belong to a stray animal such as a dog, but the worker wasn't convinced. They appeared far too large. Looking back in the tank, the worker noticed what looked like a big stone right at the bottom. Using a hoe to turn it over, he soon realised it was a human skull. Having never been in that situation before, the worker informed the homeowner that it was his decision what he did with this information. Thankfully, he called the police. Nobody knew it at the time, but an almost 40-year mystery was about to be solved. The homeowner had bought the property, Quaking House Farm, from his uncle in January 2014 for £467,000. The 440-acre property, a pig farm, was located in Kempsey, Worcestershire, and his uncle, David Venables, had lived there since February 1961, 53 years in total. Living with him at the property for many of those years was his wife Brenda, whom he met at a young farmers event in 1955. The pair's relationship soon blossomed, and they went on to marry on June 1st, 1960. Brenda was a farmer's daughter born in 1934, and she was raised in a close-knit family. Her parents, Harold and Winifred, raised Brenda and her sisters Rita and Jane to have strong family values. The family of five always had a strong sense of togetherness, with their parents demonstrating the benefits of a hard work ethic. Brenda was a caring and kind woman. She was loved unconditionally by her family and friends and was held in high regard. She was one of those people that made a lasting impression on anyone she met. If she walked into a room, she'd lighten it up instantly. She had a fun personality and a really infectious laugh. She was also admired for her beauty. She was always immaculately presented, with many people using the idiom prim and proper to describe her. She had impeccable manners, she was always polite, and she carried herself with a real sense of elegance and grace. When they moved into Quaking House in 1961, Brenda quickly took to the role of a farmer's wife, just like her mum had. She helped out now and again delivering cut flowers from the property's nursery, but her main job, or role for better use of a term, was that of a wife. Back in those days, it was common for wives, especially of farmers, to be seen as homemakers, caregivers. She had to spend most of her energy supporting her husband, washing his clothes, cooking his meals, etc. Both of them wanted kids of their own, they longed for a family, but it never happened. And by 1969, the marriage had gone stale. Physical intimacy was non-existent by that point, and rather than work on it together, Venables took his affection elsewhere. He was given the nickname Dirty David by the workers at the farm. That's how well known his infidelity was. He had numerous affairs, each of which Brenda was aware of. She suffered at silence in the farm while Venables went off gallivanting with other women. And it wasn't just emotional abuse that she suffered. Venables was also reportedly physically violent towards his wife. He had an on-off affair with a woman called Lorraine throughout the 1970s. It started off casual, he was seeing her, she was seeing someone else, but by the early 80s, they agreed to settle down together, and they were almost exclusive at that point. Having rekindled their relationship in Christmas of 1981, They went away together for the new year, staying in a hotel in Nottingham. The worst part? Brenda was forced to pack her husband's suitcase knowing that he was going away on this trip with his lover. To reassure Lorraine, Venables had said that he was going to divorce Brenda and that he'd already spoken to a solicitor. Whether he had or not is known only to him. Having asked Lorraine to move into the farm with him and her rejecting, he said they would just buy another property and live together. By the spring of 1982, Lorraine was fully expecting divorce proceedings to begin any day, but Brenda outright refused to divorce her husband, and she told Lorraine as much in person. That stumbling block, for a better use of a term, is what was thought to have been the motive for what happened to Brenda at the hands of her husband. All the while, Brenda continued to keep this turmoil to herself. She was an incredibly private woman. She carried a deep sense of failure over not bearing any children. That longing for parenthood left Brenda vulnerable and in a persistent state of despair. Her mental health suffered greatly as a result. She regularly saw a consultant psychiatrist called Dr. Richards who documented her struggles with depression. The key cause was Venables, her husband. Coercive control wasn't a term used frequently back in those days, if it was even known, but Venables was certainly a culprit of that behaviour. He controlled the money, restricted Brenda's access to it. He limited her freedom, and he refused to get her the medical support she so desperately needed. He didn't even let her visit the hospital for medical treatment. He didn't even allow her to be admitted to hospital. He just continued his affair, leaving Brenda alone at home. He showed no affection or sympathy to his wife. By that point, they weren't even sharing a marital bed, and whenever Brenda raised her concerns to her husband, he told her she should display her affection instead to the family dog. Things got so bad for Brenda mentally that in March of 1982, she actually contacted Samaritans. She considered taking her own life. If anyone watching this does feel that way, or you know someone who might feel that way, I urge you to do the same thing. Please contact Samaritans. They are here to help you, open 24 hours a day, every day of the year. Soon after she contacted Samaritans, she suddenly told her doctors she felt better. How true that was known only to her. She then missed an appointment with Dr. Richards on April 20th, and again, the reasons for this are not known. Sadly, her health continued to worsen. Not only did she suffer a bad bout of the flu, but she also fell down the stairs, badly injuring her left leg. She ended up getting it bandaged from her ankle all the way up to her knee. Knowing what we know about Venables, was he responsible for that? There's nothing to suggest he was, and that is conjecture for the record, but I'll leave it to you to decide. Brenda also had arthritis, so you can imagine how difficult it was to move, let alone walk. By May 1st, 1982, Winifred had become incredibly worried about her daughter. She contacted one of Brenda's oldest and closest friends, Vicky Jennings, and asked her to pay her a visit. She thought by taking Brenda out, it might lift her spirits. It'd do her the world of good. Vicky agreed, and she planned on visiting at the next available opportunity, which was May 3rd, the early May bank holiday. She rang the landline at Quaking farm that morning, but it wasn't Brenda that answered. It was Venables. He informed her that Brenda had disappeared in the middle of the night. He woke up and she was not there. Already constructing the lies he would continue to follow for decades, Venables told Vicky that he worried Brenda had taken her own life on account of her depression. Vicky headed over and searched for hours with Venables, but they found no sign of Brenda. And he still hadn't reported her missing by that point. He did that the following day, May 4th, around midday when he went to Worcester police station. Once more, he told the officers about Brenda's mental health struggles. He said that the menopause was the cause. He told a paper at the time he hadn't the faintest idea what had happened to Brenda. She'd never done anything like this before. He said, "All I can do is pray and hope that she is safe." That missing person inquiry led to a costly police investigation, not only wasting valuable resources, but time. Venables didn't have benefit from his wife's death. He inherited Brenda's estate, he also got her share of Quaking Farm, and a lucrative stake in the family's farming business. He moved on, quite the thing, while her family was suffering, with questions nobody had the answers to. Harold and Winifred died in 1985 and 1996 respectively, not knowing what had happened to their daughter. Rita and Jane spent years wondering what had happened, decades even, before that fateful month in July 2019. In the interim, Brenda's name was added to her parents' joint gravestone. It marked her date of death as 1982. If I bring the septic tank back to the story now, in 1982 it was located somewhere on the property at Quaking House that only a handful of people knew about, including Venables of course. It was covered by overgrown hedges and vegetation, meant that unless you knew where it was, let alone its existence, there's no way you were finding it. After 37 years of wondering what had happened to Brenda, DNA testing confirmed that the remains found in the septic tank at Quaking House Farm belonged to her. Some clothes were also recovered that were thought to have been Brenda's. They were dated to the 1960s or mid-70s. They included half a pair of Marks & Spencer knickers or underwear, a bra, and a thread of a sweater. At first, an unexplained death inquiry was launched, but when the identity of Brenda was confirmed and it was linked to her disappearance in 1982, a murder investigation was launched on July 12, 2019. Police spoke to Venables a few days later at his new property and searched his home. By July 30th, he was arrested and charged with the murder of Brenda Venables. Given his age, he was 86 at the time, he said he thought no one would ever uncover the truth about what had happened to Brenda after she disappeared. Venables was eventually formally charged with murder on June 8, 2021. There will have been some delays due to what was going on in the world around that time, and the decision to charge him came from the Crown Prosecution Service. They said after reviewing the evidence, a prosecution was in the public interest. He appeared at Worcester Magistrates Court on June 15th, and later that day he appeared at Birmingham Crown Court. The judge granted bail on that occasion on 3 conditions. Venables must live and sleep at a nominated address, he must not apply for a passport, and he must have no contact with prosecution witnesses. On September 7th, he had a plea and trial preparation hearing at Worcester Crown Court. He pleaded not guilty to murdering Brenda. With that, his trial was set for June 7th, 2022. Mrs. Justice Tipples oversaw the proceedings, and it was put forward that Venables killed Brenda on either May 1st, 1982 or May 2nd. He's then said to have dragged her fully clothed body across the garden and dumped it in the septic tank, placing a 19-kilogram cast iron manhole cover over the top of her body to both weigh it down and cover up the smell. The defence suggested this was a spur-of-the-moment killing done in a panic, but that didn't match up with the meticulous planning and lies told by Venables. On July 15, 2022, Venables was found guilty of murder by way of a 10-2 majority verdict. 5 days later, Mrs. Justice Tipple handed him a life sentence with a minimum term of 18 years. She took into account his advanced age, poor health, and lack of prior convictions when coming up with that minimum tariff. Even so, he showed no remorse for what he'd done. Now, the latest information regarding this case comes from November 2023. Brenda's surviving family members, spearheaded by her nephew Timothy, have sought to strip Venables of his role as administrator of Brenda's estate. They're also trying to claim compensation and have Venables forfeit the inheritance he received after Brenda died, or disappeared as everyone thought at the time. They also sought damages for the assault on Brenda and the pain she suffered while married to Venables, but when he appeared via video link from prison, he said he intended to appeal his conviction. He argued that if he were ultimately proved innocent, the case for compensation would be rendered null and void. And that was the story of the murder of Brenda Venables. If you want to hear a more in-depth version of that story, please check out my podcast, British Murders with Stuart Blues. This was episode 6 of season 16. It's available on all good podcast players. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. Feel free to drop them in a comment. I'll be back soon with another video. Until then, cheerio.